My name is Jiho, 26 years old, warehouse worker, and right now I'm holding a box that weighs about as much as my dignity, which is to say, nothing. Faster, Jihoya. We don't have all day. That's Minjun. Same age as me, works the same shift, somehow always finds a way to make his work my work. He's leaning against a pallet, phone in hand, watching me carry his boxes along with mine. This is your section, I say. Not loud. Never loud. And you're better at it than me. Everyone's got a talent. He doesn't even look up from his phone. I carry the box. Of course I do. There's a manager somewhere who'll write both our names on a sheet at the end of the day, and only one of those names ever gets circled in red. 10 boxes later, my arms are shaking and Minjun is laughing with 2 other guys by the loading door. I catch one word, useless, and I know exactly who it's about. I don't turn around. Turning around means seeing their faces. Their faces are worse than the word. Section Chief Sanctual finds me at lunch. He doesn't say hello. He never says hello. Inventory count was off by 14 units in row C. That's not my row. I don't care whose row it is. It's short, and you're the one I'm looking at. He taps his clipboard against his palm, like he's deciding whether to hit me with it or just with his voice. He picks the voice. Bonus for this month, gone. Maybe you'll count better next time. I open my mouth. Close it. There's a version of me that argues, that says the count was Minjun's job, that says this isn't fair. That version of me doesn't have rent due in 9 days. Understood, I say. Sanctual walks off already talking to someone else, like I stopped existing the second he turned his back. Maybe I did. Maybe I've been not existing for years and nobody bothered to tell me. The subway ride home is the only part of the day where nobody looks at me, and I've come to like that more than I probably should. I stand by the door, forehead almost touching the glass, watching the tunnel lights blur past. There's a text from my landlord about next month's rent. There's a text from my mother asking if I've eaten. There's nothing from anyone else, because there isn't anyone else. My apartment is 1 room. A mattress, a desk I never use for anything but instant noodles, and a window that looks at the wall of the next building. I make ramen because it's cheap and it's fast, and because thinking about cooking anything else takes energy I don't have. I sit on the floor, bowl between my knees, phone propped against the wall so I can watch something without holding it. Some travel video. People laughing on a beach somewhere. I chew and I don't taste much of anything. 26 years old. This is the whole shape of my life. Wake up, get talked down to, get laughed at, come home, eat the same noodles, sleep, repeat. I used to think something would change. A promotion, a girlfriend, a different job, anything. Now I just think, this is it. This is the whole thing. I'm not angry exactly. Anger takes fuel and I'm running on empty. It's more like a low hum under my skin, always there, never loud enough to do anything about. I finish eating, rinse the bowl, and go to sleep early because there's nothing else to stay awake for. The next evening starts exactly the same as every other evening. Sanctual yells about a shipment that left 10 minutes late. Not my fault, but he doesn't check whose fault things are. He just needs someone in the room. Minjun makes a joke about my haircut in front of 2 new hires, and they laugh because that's what you do when the senior guy laughs first. I walk out at 6:30 with my bag on one shoulder, replaying nothing, feeling nothing, just moving my legs toward the station like I do every day. That's when I hear the first scream. Not the kind of scream people make when they're startled. Longer than that. Wrong in a way I can't explain, like something in the sound itself is broken. I stop walking. Down the street, near the intersection, a car has stopped at an angle it shouldn't be at, driver's door hanging open. People are running. Actually running. Not the fast walk people do when they're late for a train, but the kind of running where arms pump and eyes are wide and nobody's watching where their feet land. Get back. Get back, he's... A man's voice cut off. I should keep walking. That's what my whole life has trained me to do. Put my head down, keep moving, don't get involved, don't get noticed. So I take a step forward, toward the noise, before I understand why. Near the bus stop, 3 people are on the ground around someone. At first my brain tells me it's a fight. 4 guys jumped 1 guy, something like that. Then I see what they're doing with their hands and their mouths, and I understand that my brain lied to me, because the truth was too big to accept all at once. They are eating him. The man on the ground is still moving, still making sounds. The people on top of him don't stop. I don't remember deciding to back away. My body does it without asking me. My shoulder hits a lamppost, and the pain snaps something back into focus. This is real. This is happening. Move. A woman near me is on her phone, screaming an address at someone, screaming for an ambulance, screaming a name. Behind her, one of the three people from the bus stop lifts his head. There's blood on his mouth, and his eyes are wrong. Too still, then suddenly too fast, tracking the sound of her voice like an animal. Run, I say. Not loud enough. My throat barely lets the word out. He runs at her. I grab her arm. I don't know why. I've never grabbed a stranger's arm in my life. And I pull her sideways as the man crashes into where she was standing a half-second earlier. She screams. I don't let go. We stumble together into the mouth of an alley, and I look back once. He's already back up. His arm is bent wrong from the fall, and he doesn't seem to notice. What is that? The woman gasps. What is that? What is that? I don't have an answer. I've never needed one before. Nothing in 26 years of getting yelled at and laughed at prepared me for a man standing up on a broken arm like it's nothing. She pulls free of my grip and runs one way. I don't follow. I don't know her name, and there's a small, ugly part of me that's already calculating. Alone I can move faster. Alone I can hide better. And I hate that part of me a little. But I don't argue with it either. I press myself against the alley wall and watch the street. It's not one man anymore. It's maybe 8, 10, spreading out from the bus stop like water finding cracks in a floor. Someone gets caught near a convenience store. The scream lasts 4 seconds. Then it's not a scream anymore, and the person making it is quiet, and a moment after that, they're one of the ones moving wrong, joining the others. Minutes. It's taking minutes. I think about my apartment, 4 blocks from here, my mattress and my noodles, and my phone propped against a wall. I think about how that room felt like a cage yesterday, and how right now it sounds like the safest place in the entire world. I don't move yet. I watch a police car try to push through the crowd and get swarmed before the doors even fully open. I watch storefront glass shatter. I watch a man in a suit, the kind of suit that used to make me feel small just looking at it, get pulled down by 2 of them and stop struggling almost immediately. Whatever this is, it isn't stopping at the bus stop. It isn't stopping at this street. By the time I stop counting the bodies moving wrong, there are more of them than there are of us. Somewhere behind the panic in my chest, something else starts to move. Quiet at first. A single thought, cold and clear in a way nothing in my life has been clear before. Everyone who is still running normally is going to get caught eventually, in the open, in a crowd, doing exactly what their fear tells them to do. I have spent 7 years doing exactly what I was told. Carrying boxes that weren't mine. Taking blame that wasn't mine. Standing still while people who were supposed to look out for me looked straight through me instead. I look at the alley walls around me. Dumpster. Fire escape bolted too high to reach. A side door, propped slightly open by a folded cardboard box, leading into the back of some shop. For the first time since I can remember, nobody is watching me. Nobody is going to yell at me for doing this wrong. There's no manager, no Minjun, no bonus to lose. There's just me, and the door, and the choice. I push off the wall and move toward it. The storeroom behind the door is small. Mops, a rusted sink, shelves of cleaning supplies nobody's touched in months. I pull the door shut behind me and slide the bolt across. It's thin metal. It wouldn't stop a determined teenager, let alone whatever is happening outside. But it's something, and right now something is more than I've had in years. Through the wall, I can hear the street. Not screaming anymore, mostly. Worse than screaming, a kind of low, wet chaos, feet dragging, glass crunching underfoot, something that might be a growl if a person could growl. I stand in the dark with my back against a shelf, and I make myself breathe slower. Okay. I don't know what's happening. Nobody does. Not the police. Not whoever the woman on the phone was calling. Not the man in the suit who stopped struggling too fast. But I know one thing, clear as anything I've ever known. Standing still in the open gets you killed, and running blind gets you killed slower. I open one of the shelves. Bleach. Rags. A box cutter with a stub of blade left in it. The kind the shop probably uses to break down delivery boxes. I take it. My hand is shaking so hard I almost drop it, and I laugh. One short, ugly laugh. Because a box cutter is exactly the kind of weapon a warehouse nobody would end up with. I find a mop, too. Wooden handle, sturdy. I don't have a plan for it yet. I just know that a stick is better than nothing, and nothing is what I've had my whole life. I wait maybe 20 minutes before I risk the door again. long enough for the worst of the noise outside to move on down the street, chasing something else, someone else, long enough for the guilt of that thought to settle into my chest and stay there, because I know exactly what moved on means for whoever it moved on to. I crack the door an inch. The alley is empty, trash scattered, one shoe lying by itself near the dumpster, no owner in sight. My apartment is 4 blocks. Home has never sounded like a plan before. Tonight, it's the only plan I've got. I move along the wall, mop in one hand, box cutter in the other, and I feel something I don't recognize at first because I've never had a reason to feel it. Not confidence. Not yet. But something adjacent to it. Attention. Real attention. The kind I never had to use at the warehouse because nothing there could actually kill me. 2 streets over. I see the first one up close since the alley. Was, maybe in her 50s, cardigan half torn off one shoulder, standing in the middle of the road facing away from me. Not moving toward anything. Just standing, head tilted at an angle a living neck doesn't sit at comfortably. I stop walking. My whole body wants to freeze the way I used to freeze when Sangchul started yelling. Small, quiet. Hope he doesn't notice you. That instinct kept me safe at the warehouse. Out here I understand almost immediately that it will get me killed, because freezing doesn't make you invisible to something that's already looking for movement and sound and heat. So instead I do something I've never once done in my life. I choose. There's a chain link fence to my left, waist height, blocking off a construction site. I could go around, add 2 minutes, stay far from her. Or I could risk the shortcut straight past her, save the 2 minutes, and hope she doesn't turn. 2 minutes doesn't matter to a person who has nowhere to be. 2 minutes matters enormously to someone who doesn't know how much time is left before this city runs completely out of quiet corners. I go around. It costs me nothing but time, and for the first time in longer than I can remember, spending time on caution instead of laziness feels like the correct math, not the coward's math. 3 blocks from home, it stops being about 1 or 2 of them. A crowd spills out of a convenience store's shattered window. Not customers, not anymore. And at the front of it is a boy, maybe 16, still wearing his school uniform. Jacket soaked dark down the front. He sees me. All of them see me at once, the way a flock of birds turns together without any of them signaling first. I run. I have never run from anything in my life that wasn't a deadline or a bus. My lungs burn in the first block. My legs know exactly how many hours a day I spend sitting or standing still and hate me for every one of them. But behind me the sound of a dozen wrong footsteps doesn't slow down either. And somewhere in the second block I stop thinking about my lungs completely and start thinking only about the next corner. I duck left into a narrow gap between 2 buildings. One I remember from years of walking this same route home. Too tight for 2 people to pass shoulder to shoulder. I don't know if that will matter to them. I don't know anything about how they think, if they think. It matters. The boy in the school uniform hits the gap first, and the space narrows his shoulders wrong, slows him down just enough. I don't wait to see what happens to the ones behind him. I keep moving, out the far end, into an open lot, toward the back entrance of my building. The stairwell door is propped by a brick, like always. The super's been meaning to fix that lock for 2 years. Tonight, I'm grateful he never did. I take the stairs 2 at a time to the 3rd floor, and by the time I reach my door, my hands are shaking too hard to get the key into the lock on the first try, or the second. 3rd try, it turns. Inside, I throw the deadbolt and press my back against the door and slide down it until I'm sitting on my own floor, mop across my knees, box cutter still in my fist. For a long minute, I don't do anything except breathe and listen to my own heartbeat, too loud in the small room. Then I hear them below. Not inside the building yet. In the street, in the stairwell entrance, a dragging, shuffling weight of sound that keeps building instead of passing. I get up. I check the window. Down in the lot, maybe 15 of them are gathered around the propped stairwell door, the same door I came through, the same brick holding it open. I think about my life exactly 1 day ago. Minjun laughing at my haircut. Sangchul taking my bonus for a mistake that wasn't mine. Me nodding, saying, understood. Carrying it home and eating noodles alone because that's what I do. That's all I've ever done. Absorb it, swallow it. Keep moving forward with my head down so nobody notices me enough to make it worse. I think about the man in the suit who stopped struggling almost immediately. I think about how easy it would be to do the same thing right now. Sit here, wait, hope it passes, The exact same strategy that got me through 7 years at that warehouse. Wait it out. Don't get noticed. Survive by being small. Something in me says no, and it says it with more certainty than I've felt about anything in years. I am done being the person things happen to. I go to my kitchenette and take the largest knife I own. Not much of a knife, but it's steel and it's mine. And I tape it to the end of a curtain rod with packing tape from a box I never unpacked when I moved in. Ugly. Unstable. But it gives me 4 extra feet of reach, and reach is the only advantage I have against something that doesn't feel pain the way it should. Down in the lot, one of them finds the propped brick and knocks it loose. The stairwell door swings shut. For now, that's the only lock this building has, and it's the same lock everyone in this building is depending on without knowing it. I look at my phone. No signal worth trusting, no reply from anyone. My mother's last message about eating still sitting there unanswered. I think about staying in this room until the food runs out, the same way I let every bad month run out at the warehouse, just enduring, waiting for someone else to fix it. Nobody's coming to fix this one. Sanctual isn't going to walk through that door and yell at somebody until the situation resolves itself. There's no manager standing over this crisis with a clipboard, deciding whose fault it is. For once in my whole life, that's not a frightening thought. It's the opposite. Nobody here outranks me. Nobody here gets to talk over me, laugh at me, take credit for what I build, or blame me for what I don't. I hear more of them gathering outside, drawn by something. Noise, light, the last living scent in a dying street. I pick up the taped-together spear and I look at the door, and for the first time since I was a kid, I feel something that isn't dread crawling up the back of my throat before I have to face another day. I need to move again before this building becomes exactly the kind of trap the stairwell almost was. Sitting in one room on the 3rd floor with no way down, but through them isn't survival. It's a slower version of waiting for the axe to fall. The subway station is 6 blocks from here. I remember the news scroll on some office TV, weeks ago, some drill about emergency shelter points, most of them underground. Underground means fewer ways in. Fewer ways in means fewer things to watch at once. I grab a jacket, my phone, the last of the cash I keep in a drawer, and I stand at my own door with a curtain rod spear and a box cutter, and I think about the version of me that carried Minjun's boxes yesterday, without a single word of protest. That version of me isn't the one opening this door. I go. The street outside my building is quieter than it was an hour ago, and quiet is worse. Quiet means either they've moved on, or they're waiting somewhere I can't see them. I keep to the wall, spear in one hand, box cutter tucked in my belt. 6 blocks to the subway station. I've walked this route 100 times half asleep, phone in my face, not looking at anything. Tonight I look at everything. Every doorway, every parked car, every shadow that might have weight behind it. One of them finds me near the 3rd block. Just one, slow, dragging a leg that bends wrong at the knee. It hasn't seen me yet, focused on something down a side street. I could go around. That's the smart move, the same math that saved me 2 streets back. But the station is close now, and there's a version of this where it follows the noise of my footsteps anyway. And I'd rather deal with one slow thing on my terms than have it join a group later on someone else's. I plant the base of the spear against the ground the way you'd brace a mop against a wall, and when it turns toward me, too slow, off balance on the bad leg, I put the kitchen knife taped to the end straight through where I should be looking. It drops. I stand there breathing hard, staring at my own shaking hands like they belong to somebody else. That's the first one I've killed instead of run from. It doesn't feel like victory. It feels like proof that I can do the thing I have to do, and right now, that's worth more than feeling good about it. The subway entrance has a crowd of maybe 30 people already, and someone smart has dragged furniture from a nearby shop to block the wider staircase, funneling everyone through a single narrower gate. I get waved through by a man built like a furniture mover himself, gray at the temples, barking directions like he's done this before in some other life. Inside, keep moving, don't block the stairs. That's Dusik. I learn his name within the hour, because within the hour he's already the closest thing this platform has to a leader. Former fire captain, retired 2 years, and apparently retirement didn't take the instinct out of him. The platform is packed. Fluorescent lights flicker, but hold. Somebody's brought battery lanterns from a hardware store. A woman sits against the tiled wall with a boy pressed into her side, maybe 7 years old, wide-eyed. Silent in the specific way kids get when they understand something is very wrong and nobody will explain it to them. Mira, she says when I end up sitting near her, mostly because it's the only open stretch of wall left. This is Yoon. Yoon doesn't say anything. He just watches the stairs like everyone else is doing, like the whole platform is holding its breath in the same direction. Next to me on the other side, a guy about my age is picking at an energy bar wrapper, not eating it, just tearing it into smaller pieces. Taeyong, he says, not looking up. You look about as useless as I feel right now. Jiho, cool. Useless and Jiho. Sounds like a bad drama. I almost laugh. It's the first time in longer than I can remember that a joke aimed near me didn't feel like it was aimed at me. The first night is mostly noise and fear. Every scrape against the barricaded gate sends a ripple through the platform. Someone gasps. Someone grips a child tighter. Someone near the front raises whatever they're holding like it'll matter. It's never anything. Wind. A trash can rolling. Once, a stray cat that somebody almost skewers before Dusik grabs the makeshift spear out of his hands. By the second day, the fear settles into something duller and more practical. Hunger. Somebody had the sense to raid a convenience store near the entrance before sealing it off. So there's food, but not much, and not enough for 30-some people for more than a few days. Dusik takes charge of doling it out, and it turns into the first real fight I watch happen among the living. My kid needs more than a granola bar. A man near the back snaps, gesturing at a boy who looks about 10. You're giving the same to everyone. That's not fair to families. Everyone gets the same because the second we start deciding who deserves more, this stops being 30 people and starts being 30 separate problems. Dusik says. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't need to. Something about the way he stands makes people listen even when they don't want to. The man backs down, muttering. Dusik catches my eye afterward, just briefly, like he's cataloging who watched that exchange and how. It's the barricade that gets me noticed properly. Day 2. I'm walking the perimeter of what we've sealed off, partly to feel useful, partly because sitting still with my own thoughts is worse than moving. And I notice the gate on the east staircase. Someone stacked shelving units and a vending machine against it, solid looking from a distance, but I watch it shift half an inch every time something leans on it from outside. And there's a gap low along the ground where the vending machine doesn't sit flush against the stair rail. Nobody else seems to have noticed, or they noticed and decided it wasn't their problem, the same way I used to decide the warehouse's problems weren't mine because speaking up never changed anything before. I go find Dusik. East gate, I say. There's a gap at the bottom, maybe a foot wide, where the vending machine doesn't meet the rail. If something small gets low enough, or if enough weight pushes from outside, it's going to give at that seam first, not in the middle where everyone's watching. He looks at me for a second too long, like he's deciding whether I'm wasting his time. Then he walks over to check it himself, crouches, runs a hand along the gap. Huh, he says. Just that. We fix it together, wedge a bent shopping cart frame into the gap, brace it against the stair rail with a snapped-off length of pipe someone had left near the tracks. Takes 20 minutes. Isn't glamorous. Nobody claps. But that evening, when Dusik divides up watch shifts for the night, he puts my name on the list without me asking, right next to his own. You've got an eye for where things break, he says, like it's a simple fact and not the first time in years anyone said something about me that wasn't a complaint. Taeyong, overhearing, grins at me from across the platform. Useless and Jiho gets promoted. Drama's getting good. I don't say much back, but something in my chest sits a little different than it did 2 days ago, and it isn't fear. Night 3, the vending machine seam gets tested for real. Something outside pushes hard enough that the whole gate groans, and for a few seconds half the platform is on its feet. Someone's crying. Myra's got Yoon pulled tight against her side with both arms. The shopping cart frame holds. Barely, but it holds. Dusik looks over at me across the platform, and for once he doesn't say anything at all. He doesn't need to. I sit back down against the tile wall next to Taeyong, hands still shaking slightly from the noise, and I think about Sangchul taking my bonus over 14 missing units that weren't my fault. I think about Minjun laughing while I carried his boxes. None of that is real anymore. Not down here. Down here, the only thing that matters is whether you see the gap before it becomes the thing that gets people killed. For the first time since I can remember, I'm not the last person anyone would trust to notice. Taeyong tears another strip off his empty wrapper and flicks it at nothing in particular. So, he says, You always this sharp, or is the apocalypse just really working for you? I almost smile. Guess we'll find out. Above us, faint through concrete and steel, something drags itself along the sealed street, searching for a way in it isn't going to find tonight. Later, when most of the platform has settled into whatever passes for sleep down here, coats bunched into pillows, backs against tile, nobody fully relaxed. Mira shifts closer with Yoon already asleep against her lap. You're the one who fixed the east gate, she says. Not a question. Dusik fixed it. I just pointed at it. Pointing at the right thing matters. She looks down at her son's face, smooths his hair back once. My husband worked logistics. Route planning, inventory, that kind of thing. Nobody at his company ever thought his job mattered until a shipment went missing and suddenly he was the only one who could find it. I don't ask where her husband is now. I don't think I want to know, and I don't think she wants to say it out loud yet. I used to do inventory too. I say instead. Warehouse. Counted boxes nobody cared about until they went missing. And then somehow it was always my fault. Sounds familiar. A small, tired smile. Funny how the world only wants people who notice details when something's already broken. Yoon stirs slightly, mutters something in his sleep, goes still again. Myra's hand doesn't stop moving through his hair, slow and automatic. The kind of motion that isn't really about the kid anymore, just about having something steady to hold on to. He hasn't cried once, she says quiet. Not since we got down here. I don't know if that's good or if it's the scariest thing I've ever seen. I don't have an answer for that. Neither, I suspect, does she. We just sit with it, the two of us and the sleeping boy between us, while somewhere above the ceiling something keeps dragging itself back and forth, looking for a door that isn't going to open. By day 5, the air down here has a taste to it. Stale, thick, like breathing through a wet towel. The ventilation shafts that used to hum with the subway system went dead the same night the power grid started failing block by block. And 30-some people breathing in a sealed concrete box for 5 days does something to the air that no amount of battery lanterns can fix. Food is worse. What was left of the convenience store haul is down to a few boxes of crackers, some canned fish nobody wants to be the one to open first, and half a case of water bottles that Dusik guards like it's gold. 2 crackers, he says, handing them out one row at a time. Water only if you're on watch or if a kid asks. Nobody argues anymore. Day 2, there was shouting over portions. Day 5, everyone's too tired and too hungry to waste the energy. I sit near the east gate. My gate, unofficially, since I'm the one who keeps checking the shopping cart brace holds. And I watch Yoon share half his cracker with his mother without being asked. 7 years old, and he already understands the math better than some of the adults did on day 1. Taeyong drops down next to me, chewing his own cracker slow, making it last. You ever think about how weird it is, he says. That 3 days ago the biggest problem in my life was my manager docking my pay for showing up 4 minutes late. I had a version of that exact day, I say. Different manager. Same kind of problem. Feels like someone else's life now. Feels like it happened to someone else's life. I agree. He almost laughs, then doesn't, because a scraping sound comes from the west gate. Not outside, inside, from behind the barricade line where the sick bay is, where a woman named Harry has been lying on a folded coat for the last 2 days. Harry came in on day 3 with a bandage wrapped tight around her forearm, insisting a piece of rebar had caught her during the run to the station, nothing more. Dusik checked it once, briefly, in bad light, and let it go because there were 30 other things demanding his attention and because she seemed fine. Tired, scared, but fine. Nobody checked again. By day 5, fine has curdled into something else. She's been sweating through her clothes since last night, mumbling things that don't track, refusing water. This morning she stopped answering when people spoke to her. The scraping sound is her, dragging herself off the folded coat, and when I turn to look, her eyes have gone wrong in exactly the way I remember from that man in the alley on the very first night. Too still, then suddenly too fast. Get back. I don't recognize my own voice, how loud it comes out. Everyone get back from her. Half the platform freezes exactly the way I used to freeze at the warehouse, hoping if they don't move, they won't be seen. The other half scrambles backward, knocking into each other, someone's foot catching a lantern and sending it rolling, throwing shadows sideways across the tile. Harry lunges at the nearest person, a man who'd been sharing water with her an hour earlier out of simple kindness. He goes down hard, more from shock than from her weight, and screams in a way that finally shakes the frozen half of the platform loose. Taeyong moves before I do. He's got a length of pipe from the barricade supplies, and he's already swinging it into her shoulder to knock her off the man before I've even finished standing up. It buys 2 seconds. 2 seconds is not enough on its own, but it's enough for me to close the distance with the taped spear still in my hand from watch duty. And I put the kitchen knife through the side of her skull the way I did with the one on the street outside my building. Except this time my hands don't shake nearly as much as I expect them to. She drops. The man she grabbed is bleeding from where her nails tore his arm. Not bitten, just scratched, and for a second the whole platform holds its breath waiting to see if that distinction matters. It's not a bite, Dusik says, crouching fast, checking. Just scratches. He's fine. Nobody fully relaxes. I don't either. I don't know the rules of this thing any better than anyone else down here, and neither does Dusik, and pretending otherwise won't help. We wrap Harry's body in a tarp because nobody wants to look at her, and Dusik and 2 others carry her up toward the sealed east gate to leave outside the barricade line. Because there is nowhere down here that isn't inside the same air everyone else is breathing. Mira has Yoon's face pressed against her shoulder the whole time, one hand cupped over his other ear. He doesn't need to see this. Nobody's kid needs to see this. Afterward, the platform is quieter than it's been since day one. Not the tense quiet of people listening for danger outside. The other kind, the quiet of people realizing the danger doesn't have to come from outside at all. She said it was rebar. Someone mutters, not really to anyone. She said it wasn't a bite. Maybe she believed that, Taeyong says. He's sitting with his back against the tile, pipe still in his hand, knuckles white around it in a way that wasn't there an hour ago. Or maybe she just didn't want to be the one who got left outside. Nobody has an answer for that either. I think about it longer than I wanna. If it had been me with a scratch I couldn't explain, would I have said something, or would I have wrapped a bandage tight and hoped it was nothing? The same way I used to hope every bad month at the warehouse would just pass on its own if I stayed quiet enough. I don't like the answer I land on. That night, Dusik finds me on watch at the east gate, sits down heavy against the wall next to me without asking. You moved fast back there, he says. Taeyong moved first. Taeyong bought 2 seconds. You ended it. He rubs a hand down his face, and for the first time since I met him 5 days ago, he looks less like a man in charge and more like a man who hasn't slept properly since this started. We can't keep doing this. The barricades are holding. The barricades are holding against what's outside. What almost got that man tonight was already inside, sleeping 10 feet from his own kid. He gestures at the platform behind us, the huddled shapes of people trying to rest. Air's bad. Water's rationed to nothing. And now everyone down here is going to spend every night wondering if the person sleeping next to them has a scratch they didn't mention. I already know where this is going, because I've been circling the same thought since I fixed the vending machine gap on day 2 and realized nobody down here had actually planned for more than a few days. This was never going to hold long term. No, it wasn't. He's quiet for a second, watching the shopping cart brace like it might answer him. We need walls we can actually defend for months, not weeks. Ventilation that works. A way to get water that isn't a case of bottles that runs out. Somewhere with more than one choke point everyone has to trust blindly. You have somewhere in mind? Not yet. He looks at me sideways. But you're the one who spots the gap before it becomes a problem. I want you thinking about this one too. It's such a small thing to say, and it lands heavier than anything Sanctual ever said to me in 3 years of employee reviews. Someone in charge, actually asking what I think, before the crisis instead of after it. I'll think about it, I say. Above us, the same dragging, searching sound moves along the sealed street it's moved along every night since we got here. Patient in the way nothing patient should be. Down here, the platform sleeps in shifts, 30-some people breathing air that gets a little thinner every day, waiting on a plan nobody has finished making yet. I don't sleep much that night. I sit with the spear across my knees and I think about walls and water and choke points, and for the first time and longer than I can remember. The thing keeping me awake isn't fear of getting yelled at tomorrow. It's the weight of someone finally trusting me to get something right. Dusik picks 3 of us for the first supply run, and I'm one of them, which still feels strange to say out loud even inside my own head. Taeyang's the second. The third is a quiet guy named Sunho who used to work security at a department store and actually knows how to hold a bat like it's for more than decoration. In, Fast out, Dusik says, laying a torn subway map flat on the tile. He's circled a mid-sized supermarket 4 blocks from the station, close enough to reach without crossing the worst of the intersections we've watched swarm every night. Food, water, anything medical. You see more than a handful of them. You leave the bags and you run. Bags aren't worth a life. Copy, Taeyong says, and for once there's no joke behind it. I check the spear one more time before we go. The tape's held up better than I expected, but I reinforce it anyway, wrapping another layer around the knife where it meets the curtain rod. Small thing. Doesn't cost anything but a few minutes. The kind of math I never used to bother with when the only thing at stake was a shift review. The streets outside are worse than they looked from the platform stairwell. Cars abandoned at angles. One with a door still hanging open, a stroller on its side near the curb that none of us look at directly. The smell hits before anything else does, something gone wrong in a way that has nothing to do with garbage. We move low, sticking to the side of buildings, and Sunho leads because he actually knows this stretch of road from years of walking it to his old job. Taeyong stays close behind me, close enough that I can hear him breathing shallow and fast, trying to keep it quiet. The supermarket's front doors are shattered, but the inside looks mostly untouched. Shelves still stocked in places, like the panic hit before the looting did. We split the aisles between us, filling backpacks fast. Canned goods, bottled water, a first aid kit still sealed in its box, batteries. Sunho finds the pharmacy counter at the back, jimmies the gate with a crowbar he'd brought for exactly this. Antibiotics, he says, low and urgent, stuffing boxes into his bag. This is worth more than the whole food aisle. I'm crouched near the canned vegetables, doing the math out loud without meaning to. 6 cans here, maybe 4 kilos. Water's heavier, 12 bottles is most of what's left in my bag. If we push for more, we're slower on the way back. Since when do you count groceries like a general planning a war? Taeyong mutters, grinning despite himself as he shoves 2 more cans into his own pack. Since counting things is the only skill anyone ever let me use. That gets an actual laugh out of him, quiet and surprised, cut short by a sound from the front of the store, glass shifting. Feet on broken debris, more than one set. We freeze at the same time, all 3 of us, and through the gap in the shattered doorway, I count 4 of them shuffling past outside, then 2 more joining from a side street. Not aimed at us yet, just moving, the way they always seem to move, searching without a target until something gives them one. Back exit. Sunho breathes, already angling toward the loading dock at the rear of the store. It's a good plan right up until the dock door groans on its hinges louder than any of us expect, and every head outside turns at once. Go, 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 we run. Out through the loading dock into an alley that dead ends into a chain-link fence higher than the one I skirted around on the first night. Tying's already climbing before I catch up, bag slung awkward on one shoulder, and Sunho boosts me up from below with a grip on my leg that leaves a bruise I don't feel until much later. Sunho doesn't make it over as clean. His bag catches on the fence top, and in the half-second, he spins yanking it free. The first of them reaches the alley mouth behind him. Cut it loose, I shout, already dropping back down on my side of the fence, spear in hand through the gaps in the links. He doesn't cut it loose. He drags it with him, tearing his palm open on the wire in the process, and drops down on our side just as the first one slams into the fence hard enough to rattle the whole thing. The fence holds. Barely. It buys us the 6 or 7 seconds we need to put distance between us and the alley before more of them find a way around. We don't stop running until 3 streets later, chests heaving, and even then only because Taeyong physically grabs my arm and pulls me into the recessed doorway of a shuttered pharmacy. We lost mine, Sunho says, breathing hard, staring at the fence-torn bag still looped over his good shoulder. Half the antibiotics spilled somewhere in that alley gone. His palm is bleeding freely where the wire caught it. Not all of it, I say, checking. 2 boxes survived the fall. Better than nothing. We're alive. That's the actual math that matters. Sunho doesn't look convinced, cradling his hand, but he doesn't argue either. We take the long way back, avoiding the main road, and it costs us almost 40 minutes we don't really have before dark starts creeping into the sky. It's on that longer route, cutting through a residential side street, that we find him. He's crouched behind an overturned cart near a shuttered pharmacy, thin, filthy, jacket torn at the shoulder, flinching hard when he sees us approach like he expects to be hit. It takes me a full 3 seconds to place the face under the grime, because the version of it I remember was always smug, always looking down at me over a stack of boxes he wasn't carrying. Minjun. He looks up at the sound of his own name, and something in his face shifts from animal fear to a different, smaller kind of fear when he recognizes me. Jiho. His voice cracks on it. Jiho. Oh God. Please. I've been out here for 2 days. I haven't eaten. Taeyong glances at me, unreadable, waiting to see what I do with this. There's a version of me, and it's not even a small version, that remembers every box I carried while he laughed with the others, every useless said just loud enough for me to hear, and wants to walk past him the exact same way he'd have walked past me. But I'm not carrying his boxes to protect a paycheck anymore. Whatever this is now, it isn't the warehouse, and I'm not the same person who used to measure himself against what Minjun thought of him. Get up, I say. We're not far from shelter. You're helping me? He says it like the question doesn't make sense to him, and honestly, some small ugly part of me agrees with him. I'm not doing it for you, I say, and it's mostly true. I'm doing it because leaving a person out here to die isn't who I'm choosing to be, even if it's who you'd have been to me. He doesn't have anything to say to that. He just gets up, shaking, and falls in behind us, and Sunho eyes him warily the whole rest of the walk, one hand still pressed to his bleeding palm. Back at the station, Dusik takes one look at the state of us. Sunho's hand, half the medical supplies gone, a stranger trailing behind covered in 2 days of street grime, and doesn't ask questions until everyone's inside the barricade line. Extra mouth, he says, once Minjun's been given water and pushed off toward a corner to rest, out of earshot. Not hostile, just factual. You know him, worked with him, before. Good history or bad? Bad, I say. Doesn't matter anymore. Dusik studies me for a second, the way he does when he's deciding whether something's worth pushing on, then lets it go. Your call cost us time and half the antibiotics. But you brought back 3 people instead of 2, and nobody bled out in that alley. I'll take that trade. Taeyong drops down next to me later, once the bags are sorted and the food's been logged against how many days it might buy us. You know he's going to be useless around here for a while, right? Guy looks like he's never lifted anything heavier than blame in his life. Probably, I say. And you brought him back anyway. I spent 7 years being the person nobody bothered to help, I say. Didn't feel right becoming the reason somebody else didn't make it, even if that somebody's Minjun. Taeyong doesn't say anything for a moment, just looks at me sideways with something that isn't quite a joke building behind his eyes. Useless in Jiho really is turning into a different show than I thought. Across the platform, Minjun sits alone against the tile wall, knees pulled to his chest. Looking smaller than I ever remember him looking in 3 years of watching him laugh at my expense. He catches me looking and glances away fast, like he's afraid I'll change my mind if he holds eye contact too long. I don't plan on changing my mind, but I don't plan on forgetting either. 9 days in, and the platform has stopped feeling like shelter and started feeling like a countdown. Dusik's kept the textile warehouse idea half-buried since the night he first mentioned it, testing the ground before committing to it out loud. But the ground keeps giving him reasons to stop waiting. Water rationing is down to a mouthful at a time unless you're on watch. The air's thick enough that headaches have become background noise nobody mentions anymore. And 2 more scares like Harry, false alarms, thankfully just fevers and bad coughs, have left everyone flinching at every sneeze. He finally says it out loud at what passes for a meeting these days. Him, me, Taeyong, Sunho, and Mira, gathered near the east gate where the batteries and the lanterns are dimmest, and nobody else needs to overhear yet. There's a place, Dusik says. Old textile warehouse off the industrial road, past the river bridge. Told Jiho about it a few nights back. Concrete walls, 2 entrances if you don't count roof access, loading bay doors thick enough to stop a car. It's not close. 2, maybe 3 kilometers through streets we haven't scouted since day 1. 2 entrances instead of a dozen access points is worth a lot on its own, I say. This station's got the subway tunnels on both ends, the vent shafts, 2 staircases. We're not holding a fortress down here. We're holding a sieve that hasn't fully failed yet. Sunho, palm still bandaged from the fence, doesn't look convinced. 3 kilometers of open street with 30 people, including a 7-year-old. That's not a walk, that's a gauntlet. Staying here isn't free either, Mira says quietly. She hasn't spoken much at these gatherings. But when she does, people listen, maybe because she's the one with the most to lose and the least patience for wasted time. Yoon stopped asking when we're leaving. He stopped asking a lot of things. I don't want to wait until this place fails on its own before we find out whether the warehouse would have worked. Dusik nods slowly, like her words settle something he'd already decided but hadn't said. It's a risk either way, but I'd rather take one big risk moving towards something better than keep taking small risks standing still and hoping the small risks don't add up. Tactically, I say, the real problem isn't the warehouse. It's the road. If we go, we don't take 30 people down one street blind. We need eyes ahead, a route mapped in daylight, and a fallback if it goes wrong halfway there. You offering to walk it first? Taeyong asks. If that's what it takes. Sunho still looks unconvinced, arms crossed over his bandaged hand. And if the warehouse is already occupied, or collapsed, or looted bare, or 100 other things that could have happened to it in 9 days? Then we come back, Dusik says. But we don't find that out by staying here arguing about it until the water runs out completely. Nobody has a clean answer to that. Sunho doesn't like it, but he doesn't have a better plan either, and eventually the argument settles into something closer to reluctant agreement than enthusiasm. That's fine. Enthusiasm isn't required. Movement is. Word spreads through the platform faster than Dusik probably wanted it to. By the time he's ready to address the group properly, half of them have already heard some version of the plan secondhand, and not all of them like what they've heard. You want to march 30 people 3 kilometers through open streets, a man near the back says. One of the ones who argued about food portions back on day 2. His name's Backgun, and he's made a habit of arguing about most things since. Based on what? A story about thick walls somebody saw driving to a family dinner 2 years ago. Based on the fact that this station has a shelf life, and we're already past the halfway point of it, Dusik says, patient in a way that suggests this isn't the first time he's had this exact conversation in his own head. I'm not asking anyone to march blind. Scouts go first. If it's bad, we don't go. And if it's fine for the scouts and falls apart, the second 30 of us are strung out on an open road. Backgun presses. Some of us have kids. Some of us can't run the way your scouting team can. Myra's jaw tightens beside me, but it's Dusik who answers before I can. Nobody's kid gets left behind on that road. We move as a group, fast points covered by whoever's fastest, slow points covered from both sides. It's a plan, not a guarantee. Staying here isn't a guarantee either. It just feels like one because nothing's failed yet. Feels like one is better than nothing, Backgun mutters, but he doesn't push further. And a few others who'd been nodding along with him go quiet too, unconvinced but out of arguments for the moment. I catch Taeyang's eye across the small crowd, and he gives me a look that says what I'm already thinking. Not everyone's coming along easily. And dragging 30 people somewhere they don't fully believe in is its own kind of risk, separate from the zombies waiting outside. We don't need everyone convinced tonight, I say quietly, mostly to Dusik once the group starts breaking apart. We need the scouting run to come back with something solid enough that the argument answers itself. That's the idea, Dusik says. Let's hope the warehouse cooperates with it. The plan takes shape over the next 2 days, split into 2 groups. First, a small scouting team. Me, Taeyong, Dusik, to check the warehouse and map the safest route without exposing everyone at once. Then, if it holds up, the full group makes the trip in daylight, moving fast, minimal stops. Minjun asks to come on the scouting run. It catches me off guard enough that I actually stop what I'm doing. Checking the spear tape again, an old habit now, and look at him properly for the first time since the alley. He's cleaner than he was 3 days ago. Someone gave him a spare jacket, but he still holds himself smaller than I remember, shoulders pulled in like he's bracing for a hit that hasn't come yet. You don't have to prove anything, I say. I know. He looks at his own hands. I want it anyway. I've spent 3 days eating food I didn't help find, sleeping under a barricade I didn't help build. I'd rather be useful than be a guy everyone's quietly annoyed is taking up space. I think about telling him no, that 4 is too many for a quiet scouting run. That this isn't about proving anything to anyone. But some of what he's saying lands closer to home than I expect, because it's not so different from what drove me out of that alley on the first night. The difference between being someone things happen to and being someone who does something. Fine, I say. You listen to what Dusik says when he says it the first time. No arguing, no freezing. Understood, he says, And there's nothing sarcastic in how he says it. No trace of the guy who used to say things like that to Sangchul with a smirk half hidden behind it. That evening, before the scouting run, I end up sitting near Mira and Yoon again, the same corner of tile that's become an unofficial spot of quiet in a platform that rarely has any. Yoon's drawing on the back of a torn cereal box with a stub of pencil somebody found, small careful lines that turn out to be a building, boxy, thick-walled, with a single door drawn twice its actual size. Is that the warehouse? I ask. He nods without looking up. Mom said it has thick walls. I wanted to see what thick walls look like. Pretty close, I think. I say, studying the drawing. The door really is comically oversized, but something about a 7-year-old's idea of safety being one enormous, unbreakable door doesn't feel far off from what we're actually planning to build. Mira watches her son work in silence for a while, then looks at me. Thank you, she says, for pushing for this. I know staying here felt safer to some people. Familiar, at least. Familiar isn't the same as safe, I say. I spent 7 years thinking familiar was as good as it gets. Turns out familiar was just slow. She almost smiles at that, tired but real. Well, let's hope slow doesn't turn out to be safer than we think, 3 kilometers from now. It won't. I say, more certainty in my voice than I actually feel. But it's the kind of thing someone needs to say before all of this, and right now, I'm the one saying it. Yoon holds up the drawing, admiring his own oversized door for a second, then sets it carefully in the small bag his mother keeps their few belongings in, like it's something worth protecting. Above us, through concrete and steel, the city keeps making its slow, dragging noise, patient as always. And somewhere past the river bridge, a warehouse with real thick walls is either waiting for us or it isn't. And tomorrow, one way or another, we're going to find out which. The scouting run takes half a day and comes back with good news wrapped around a warning. The warehouse is real, exactly like Dusik described it. Thick concrete, 2 ground entrances. A loading bay door heavy enough that it takes all 4 of us leaning on it just to test how solid it feels. No sign it's been picked over. No sign anyone else has claimed it either, which Dusik points out isn't purely good news, because empty this many days and usually means something. Empty because it's safe, or empty because whoever tried it didn't make it out to tell anyone, he says, standing in the dust-filled loading bay. Voice echoing off concrete for the first time in 9 days. No way to know which. Doesn't change the math. It's still better than what we've got. The warning is the route. 2 streets along the way are choked with wrecked cars, forcing a detour past what used to be a school, and the school's courtyard gate hangs open, and past the gate. More of them are gathered than any of us are comfortable with, drawn by something we can't identify and don't want to investigate closer. We go around, Minjun says, and it's the first time he's offered an opinion instead of just following instructions. Quiet at the back of the group the whole scouting run. There's an access road behind the school. I used to cut through there in high school to skip morning assembly. Longer, but it avoids the courtyard completely. Dusik looks at him for a second, weighing it, then nods. Show me on the way back. It adds maybe 10 minutes to the total route. 10 minutes is nothing against 30 of the things gathered in one courtyard. Back at the loading bay, Dusik spreads the torn subway map out again, this time marking the new route in pencil, the school detour drawn in as a wide loop around the courtyard gate. We leave in 2 days, he says. Gives us time to prep, not so much time that the water runs out from under us first. 2 days is enough to sort who carries what. I say, kids and anyone hurt go in the middle. Fastest people take front and rear. Anyone with a weapon that isn't a kitchen knife taped to a stick goes on the flanks. Taeyong glances at my spear. Some of us are still working with kitchen knives taped to sticks. Then you're on a flank too, I say, and he laughs despite himself, the tension in his shoulders easing half a degree. Minjun, still sitting a little apart from the group even after the scouting run, speaks up again, quieter this time. I can carry supplies. I'm not much use in a fight, but I can carry things and I know that access road better than anyone else here. Then you're walking near the middle with the load. Close enough to guide us if the detour needs adjusting, Dusik says, and Minjun nods, looking almost relieved to have a defined place in the plan instead of hovering at its edge. The full group moves out at first light 2 days later, when Dusik decides waiting longer only spends water and patience that could better be spent walking. 31 people, counting the newest arrivals who trickled in over the past week once word got around that the subway platform had food and a plan. It's the most anyone's moved together since this started, and it shows in how carefully everyone paces themselves, nobody talking above a whisper, kids carried by whoever has the free arms for it. I walk near the front with Dusik and Taeyong. Minjun and Sunho anchor different points along the line, watching the sides. Mira keeps Yoon close to the middle of the group, the safest position anyone could manage, and I catch myself checking on them more than once without quite deciding to. The first kilometer goes almost exactly like the scout run predicted. Quiet streets, the occasional distant shuffle of something moving elsewhere, nothing close enough to matter. The second kilometer is where the wrecked cars start, and the detour toward the access road behind the school begins, and that's where it goes wrong. Nobody sees where the first one comes from. 1 second the access road is clear, the next there's a shape lurching out from behind a rusted delivery van parked at an angle that's blocked half the path since long before any of this started. It grabs the nearest person, an older man near the back of the group named Yongdi, someone I've barely spoken to in 9 days beyond a nod in passing. He goes down hard, and the sound he makes pulls every head in the group around at once. Exactly the panic response Dusik spent 2 days trying to plan around. Hold the line, don't scatter. Dusik's voice cuts through, but panic doesn't listen well to instructions, and for a few seconds the group buckles inward on itself, people pushing past each other. A child crying somewhere near the middle. More of them come from the same direction, drawn by the noise, faster than anyone expected from a street that looked completely empty 90 seconds ago. Taeyong and I move together without discussing it, cutting toward the widening gap where Yongdi went down, and it's already too late for him. The group has to accept that fast. Faster than feels human, because stopping to grieve in the middle of an active swarm gets more people killed than the swarm itself. Sunho, take the left flank. Keep them moving forward. I'm shouting things I've never shouted before, giving directions like I have any right to. Except right now nobody's arguing about whether I've earned it. Yongti's the one who buys us the room to keep moving. Whether it's a choice or just what's left of him after the fall, he doesn't get back up in the direction of the group. He drags 2 of them backward toward the delivery van, away from the huddled mass of people pushing forward, and by the time Taeyong and I reach the gap he opened, there's nothing left to save. Only distance to close before more of them notice what's happening. Go, go, keep moving, don't look back. I don't know if I'm saying it for the group or for myself. We don't stop running until the warehouse's loading bay door is in sight, and even then, Dusik makes everyone keep moving until they're fully inside and the doors dragged shut behind the last person through, the heavy metal groaning into place with a sound that feels, for the first time in 9 days, like actual safety instead of hope wearing safety's face. 30 people made it. 31 left the station. Nobody says Yongdi's name out loud for a long time. Mira has Yoon pulled tight against her, checking him over for injuries he doesn't have, more for her own sake than his. Minjun sits against a support pillar with his knees drawn up, staring at nothing, hands still shaking from the run. I find a quiet corner near the loading bay and sit down harder than I mean to, spear across my knees. And it's Dusik who finds me there a few minutes later, sitting down heavy beside me the way he did that first night after Harry. He bought us the gap. Dusik says, not really a question. I don't know if he meant to. Doesn't matter if he meant to. It's what happened. Dusik rubs a hand over his face, and in the half-light of the warehouse, every one of the last 9 days shows on him at once. We got 30 people through open streets and lost 1. That's not nothing. That's not a victory either. No, I agree. It's not. We sit with that for a while, the 2 of us, listening to the sound of 30-some people slowly realizing they've made it somewhere with walls thick enough to actually hold, mixed with the quieter sound of people who understand exactly what it cost to get here. Later, once the initial shock settles and people start finding corners of the warehouse floor to claim as their own small piece of territory, Taeyong drops down across from me, uncharacteristically quiet for a long moment before he finally speaks. First time since this started that I've watched someone die and had 0 time to process it before moving on, he says. Feels wrong. Feels like it should feel like more than it does right now. It'll catch up, I say. Just not yet. Not while we're still checking if the door's actually sealed. He nods slowly, looking around at the concrete walls, the loading bay door, thick and solid in a way the shopping cart barricade back at the station never was. Guess this is it then. Home, for now. For now, I agree. Outside, faint through the thick walls, something drags itself along the industrial road, searching, same as always. Inside, for the first time in 9 days, the sound doesn't feel like it's inches away from finding a way in. It feels, for the first time, like a wall that might actually hold. The next morning, once everyone's had a few hours of the first real sleep in over a week, Dusik walks the perimeter with me, tracing the warehouse's inside edges with a flashlight beam. 2 ground entrances, he says, more to himself than to me, counting them off. Loading bay we came through, and a side door near what used to be the office section. Roof access too, but that needs a ladder nobody's brought inside yet. So for now it's not a door anyone can use against us. Water's the next problem, I say. We can hold this place from the outside. We can't drink concrete. There's a rain collection setup I want to try off the roof gutters, if we can rig something before the next dry stretch. He taps the flashlight against his palm, thinking. Food's still what we scavenged plus whatever's left in this building from before. Not enough long term. Then we plan the next run better than the last one. I say. Not to the same supermarket. Somewhere fresh, somewhere we scout properly before we commit 30 people's hope to it. Dusik almost smiles at that, tired but genuine. You're already thinking past today? Good. Somebody needs to. We keep walking the perimeter in silence for a while after that, checking corners, testing latches on the side door, mapping in our heads the shape of the place that's going to have to become more than 4 walls and a roof if any of this is going to hold past the first month. 3 weeks into the warehouse, and it barely resembles the empty concrete shell we walked into. The loading bay door stays sealed except for supply runs, reinforced now with a steel crossbar Sunho welded into place using a generator we scavenged and got running on the second week. The side door near the old office section has its own smaller barricade, watched in shifts around the clock from a platform built out of stacked pallets, high enough to see the approach road without exposing whoever's on watch. I spend most mornings on the roof now, checking the rain collection system Dusik and I rigged out of gutters and repurposed water barrels. It's not much, enough for drinking and basic washing, not enough to be careless with, but it's water that doesn't depend on finding an unlooted store, and that alone has changed the whole rhythm of how the group thinks about tomorrow. 60 gallons since the last rain. I call down to Taeyong, who's checking the barrel gauges below. That's 4 more days of buffer than we had a week ago. You say that like it's basketball stats, he calls back up, grinning. 60 gallons. The crowd goes wild. The crowd doesn't go wild for water rationing. Taeyong, you clearly haven't seen how excited Backgun gets about his allotted cup in the morning. Even Backgun, who argued against the whole move 2 weeks ago, has quieted down considerably since walking through that loading bay door himself and seeing the walls up close. The population count keeps climbing. What started as 30 people leaving the subway station is now closer to 50, word spreading through whatever scattered pockets of survivors remain in the district that there's a place with walls, water, and something like order. Dusik vets every new arrival personally before they're let past the loading bay. A short, careful conversation that's caught 2 separate people lying about scratches they didn't want to admit to. Most of the new arrivals settle in fast, grateful enough for solid walls that they don't ask many questions about who's in charge or why. A handful bring skills that shift the whole shape of what the warehouse can do. A woman named Yunji who used to run a small farm before moving to the city and knows more about growing food in cramped spaces than anyone else here. An older man, Young-ho, who spent 30 years as an electrician and gets half the warehouse's old wiring working well enough to string basic lighting off the generator. Minjun's found his footing too, in a way that still catches me off guard some mornings. He's strong in a way none of us appreciated back at the warehouse job, when strength there just meant carrying boxes for someone else's convenience. Here, he's the one hauling the heaviest crates during supply runs, reinforcing barricade points with Sunho, working until his hands blister without complaint. Didn't expect you to be the one sweating through shirts by noon every day. Taeyong tells him one afternoon, only half joking, watching Minjun help brace a support beam near the side entrance. Didn't expect it either, Minjun says, not looking up from the beam. Guess I was always good at this. Just never had a reason to be good at anything before. I catch that comment and hold on to it longer than I mean to. because it sounds uncomfortably close to something I could have said about myself 3 weeks ago. Taeyong, for his part, has taken it upon himself to make Minjun's redemption arc as loud as possible. "Hey, strongman," he calls out during a break, tossing Minjun a water pouch harder than necessary. "Careful, if you keep working like that, Jiho's gonna start calling you useful instead of me. Then where does that leave my whole personality?" "You'd survive," Minjun says, catching the pouch without looking up. "Would I, though? My entire identity down here is guy who makes jokes while Jiho counts things. You steal the muscle roll. I've got nothing left. Sounds like a you problem." Taeyong clutches his chest like he's been shot, and even Minjun, sweat-soaked and exhausted, cracks something close to a real smile. The first one I've seen from him since the alley behind the pharmacy. It's a small thing. It doesn't erase 3 years of boxes I carried that weren't mine. But small things add up differently down here than they used to, and I've stopped pretending I don't notice when they do. Dusik and I fall into an unofficial rhythm running the place together. Him handling the people's side, settling disputes, deciding who watches what shift, and me handling the structural side. The where does the next weak point show up side. The same instinct that first got his attention back at the station. "We need a proper perimeter fence around the yard." I tell him one evening, the two of us walking the edge of the warehouse's outer lot, a stretch of cracked asphalt that used to be for delivery trucks. Right now, anyone approaching from the road has a straight line to the loading bay. A fence with one gate funnels them, gives watch more warning. Materials? Fencing from the construction site 2 streets over. I scouted it yesterday with Sunho. Chain link, mostly intact, just needs hauling and reinforcing. Dusik nods slowly, already running the logistics in his head. Added to the list. We've got Yunji wanting to expand the growing beds on the south wall, Youngho wanting more wire for a second light circuit, and now a fence. Building a place worth defending was always going to be a longer list than we had hands for. I say, "Story of the last 3 weeks," he says, not unkindly. Later that evening, once the work slows and most of the warehouse settles into the low hum of 50-some people finding their own version of rest, I find Mira and Yoon near the growing beds Yunji's been building along the south wall. Yoon's got dirt under his fingernails, carefully patting soil around a row of seedlings that probably won't be ready to eat for weeks yet. But he treats each one like it matters right now. He's decided he's in charge of the beans, Mira says, a tired smile pulling at her mouth in a way I haven't seen much of since the station. Yunji told him beans grow fast, and he hasn't stopped checking on them twice a day since. Better hobby than staring at the loading bay door, I say. Anything's better than that. She watches her son for a moment longer, then looks at me properly. It's strange, watching him get excited about something again. Back at the station, I wasn't sure he remembered how. This place is starting to feel like somewhere instead of just somewhere we're stuck, I say. That probably matters more to a 7-year-old than it does to the rest of us. It matters to the rest of us too, she says. Just took longer for the adults to admit it. Yoon holds up a small trowel triumphantly, showing off a perfectly padded row of soil, and for a moment none of us are thinking about fences, or armed groups a kilometer south, or anything past the small, solid fact of dirt and seedlings and a kid who stopped flinching at every sound. It doesn't last long. Nothing quiet ever does these days. But for a few minutes, it's enough. That night, one of the newer arrivals, a thin, nervous man who came in 2 days ago with a story about scouting the district alone, pulls Dusik aside during evening rounds. Voice low enough that only a few of us catch it. There's a group, he says. Organized. Armed. I ran into their scouts about a kilometer south, near the old distribution center. They're not surviving out here, they're running things. Taking whatever they want off anyone smaller. Dusik's expression doesn't change much, but I've spent 3 weeks learning to read the small shifts, and this one settles into something wary. They say anything to you? Threaten you? Didn't get close enough to talk. Just watch long enough to see they've got more people and more guns than makes sense for random survivors who got lucky. Somebody's organizing them. After the man moves off to find a corner to sleep in, Dusik looks at me, and for the first time since we started building this place, there's something in his face that isn't just tired. We just got this place standing, he says quietly. Wasn't counting on other people wanting it before we even finished the fence. Maybe they don't want it, I say. Maybe they're just moving through. Maybe, Dusik says, in a tone that suggests he doesn't believe it any more than I do. Above us, the roof holds against a light rain that's already trickling down into the gutters, feeding the collection barrels drop by drop. Down in the yard, the outline of a chain-link fence we haven't built yet sits only as a plan on a torn subway map, and somewhere south of here, near an old distribution center, something with guns and organization is deciding whether this district has anything worth taking. For the first time since the warehouse door sealed shut behind The Last of Us 3 weeks ago, the biggest threat on my mind isn't the ones who shuffle and drag. It's the ones who still know how to plan. The fence goes up faster than I expect, mostly because half the warehouse pitches in once they understand what it means for watch shifts, fewer blind approaches, more warning before anything reaches the loading bay. By the time it's finished, a full ring of chain link with a single reinforced gate, the yard feels less like an afterthought and more like the first real layer of a place built to last. That's when the scouts find us instead of the other way around. 3 of them, walking the road openly in daylight. No attempt at stealth, which tells me almost as much as anything else about who sent them. People hiding from the dead move quiet. People who've stopped being afraid of the dead move however they want. Dusik meets them at the gate with Sunho and me a step behind, weapons visible but not raised. The lead scout is younger than I expect, maybe early 20s, wearing a tactical vest that looks scavenged rather than issued. A pistol holstered at his hip like he's used it on something other than the dead. Nice setup, he says, looking past Dusik at the fence line, the loading bay, the pallet watchtower. Didn't expect a group this organized still standing this side of the river. Can we help you? Dusik says. Not a question. A wall with words attached. Mr. Beck wanted us to pay a visit. Introduce ourselves. The scout's tone stays friendly, almost bored, the way someone talks when they already know how the conversation ends. He runs things south of here. Distribution center, warehouse district, couple neighborhoods past that. Keeps people safe, organized, fed. In exchange, groups this size usually contribute. Food, supplies, sometimes just labor if that's easier. Contribute, Sunho repeats, flat. Tribute, if you want the uglier word for it, the scout says, shrugging like the distinction doesn't matter to him either way. Mr. Beck's not unreasonable. He just doesn't like surprises, and a 50-person camp with a working fence and a generator counts as a surprise he'd rather know about. I watch him take in the details while he talks. The fence height, the gate mechanism, how many of us are visible where the watchtower sits. He's not here to negotiate. He's here to assess. We'll think about it, Dusik says. Sure. The scout smiles, easy and unbothered. Take your time. Mr. Beck's patient with new neighbors. First visit, anyway. They leave the same way they came, unhurried, and none of us relax until they're well past sight down the road. Mira finds us shortly after, Yoon's hand held tight in hers, having watched the exchange from a distance with several other residents. Tribute, she repeats, like the word itself is something she needs to test in her mouth before deciding how much to fear it. That's not a warning. That's someone deciding we already belong to them. Nobody's paying tribute to anybody, Sunho says, sharper than usual. Nobody's said we will. Dusik says, calm in a way that settles the sharper edges in the yard, at least for now. But we don't get to pretend this is the last time we hear from them either. People need to know that, without panicking about it. So what do we tell them? Mira asks. The truth, I say. Someone with guns and organization knows we exist. We're not going to hand over what we've built without a fight, and we're not going to start one either. We wait, we watch, and we make sure if they push, they regret it. It's not a comforting answer. Comforting isn't really available anymore, not since the first night this all started. But Mira nods slowly, like the honesty of it matters more than any reassurance dressed up to sound prettier than the situation actually is. He runs things, Sunho says once the gate's sealed again, tasting the phrase like it's gone bad. Since when does anyone run things? Everything's supposed to be equally screwed right now. Somebody was always going to try turning this into the same hierarchy that existed before, I say. Doesn't surprise me it happened fast. Whoever's holding the biggest stick tends to remember how to swing it. Dusik's already walking the fence line, checking angles, thinking the way he thinks before every hard decision. Straight refusal gets us a war we're not ready for. Straight compliance gets us bled slow until there's nothing left to take. So we don't do either, I say. Meaning what? Meaning we make it look like there's less here worth taking than there is, and make sure if they push. Pushing costs them more than they expect. I've been circling this thought since the scouts' eyes lingered too long on the gate mechanism. They're going to send someone to test us before Beck commits real numbers to anything. That's not a guess. That's how every bully I've ever met operates. Probe first. Escalate only if the first probe goes easy. Dusek studies me for a second. The same look he gave me at the vending machine gap weeks ago, except there's less doubt in it now. You've got an idea? I've got the start of one. We spend 2 days preparing without ever committing to open confrontation. I have Young-ho rig a section of the fence near the northeast corner, the section furthest from the main gate. The one that looks weakest from outside because we've deliberately left it looking unreinforced. With a simple tripwire connected to a stack of loose sheet metal balanced to collapse loudly the second it's disturbed. Not lethal, not meant to be, just meant to turn a quiet approach into a very loud one. Past that, along the natural approach any scout would take if they wanted a look at what's inside without using the front gate. Minjun and Sunho dig a shallow trench. Cover it with branches and loose dirt, nothing that would seriously hurt someone stepping in it. Just enough to drop them hard and slow them down long enough to be seen and dealt with on our terms instead of theirs. This feels like overkill for scouts who might not even come back, Taeyong says, watching Minjun tamp down the last of the dirt over the trench. It's not for the scouts who don't come back, I say. It's for the ones who do, expecting an easy look at a soft target. 3 nights later, 2 of them do come back, exactly where I expected. Moving quiet along the northeast approach under cover of dark, clearly assuming the weak-looking fence section means a weak point in the watch rotation too. The tripwire does its job first, a crash of sheet metal loud enough to wake half the warehouse, sending both scouts scrambling backward in a panic that costs one of them his footing right into the trench. By the time Dusek, Sunho, and I reach the fence line, the other scout is hauling his partner out by the arm, both of them abandoning any pretense of stealth, sprinting back the way they came without a single shot fired or a single blow landed. We didn't need to hurt them. We just needed them to understand, viscerally, that this fence isn't the soft edge it looked like from the road. Word comes back through the same nervous new arrival who first warned Dusek about Beck's people, apparently connected enough to the wider district gossip to hear things fast. The 2 scouts made it back to the distribution center rattled, describing traps they hadn't expected from a 50-person camp that supposedly had nothing worth the effort of real caution. Beck's not happy, the man reports, relaying secondhand what he'd heard secondhand himself. But he's also not sending anyone else yet. Word is he's more curious now than angry. Wants to know who's actually running this place. Let him wonder, Dusek says. I feel something settle in my chest that I don't fully recognize until Taeyong claps a hand on my shoulder later that night, grinning wider than I've seen from him in weeks. 2 grown men with guns, tripped by a shopping cart-grade zombie trap and a hole in the ground. I would pay actual money to have seen their faces. We didn't win anything, I say. We just made them think twice. Making a guy named Beck think twice about a 50-person camp with a working fence and a garden is basically a win around here, Taeyong says. Take the WGO. I don't argue, mostly because some small, unfamiliar part of me agrees with him. The relief doesn't last through the week. 2 nights later, one of the watch rotation on the roof spots something on the horizon that has nothing to do with Beck's people at all. A low, distant sound carried on the wind, not gunfire. Not voices, something closer to a single continuous drone made of hundreds of smaller sounds layered together. Dusek and I climb to the roof to see for ourselves. And even in the dark, even at this distance, the shape moving along the main road toward the district is unmistakable. Not a handful of them. Not the scattered dozen or 2 we've grown used to managing. A wall of them, wide as the road itself, moving slow but moving together and moving in our direction. That's not a group, Sunho says quietly, joining us on the roof, voice gone flat with the kind of fear that doesn't shout, just sits heavy. That's a herd. Dusek doesn't say anything for a long moment, watching the horizon the way a man watches weather he can't outrun. Everything we built these last few weeks, he finally says, we're about to find out if it actually holds. Nobody sleeps the rest of that night. By the time the sun starts coming up gray behind the smog, the herd is close enough to hear without straining. Thousands of scraping feet turned into a single continuous sound. No gaps between individual footsteps anymore, just a low, endless drag rolling toward us like weather. Dusik gathers everyone he trusts to hold a plan under pressure. Me, Taeyong, Sunho, Minjun, Youngho, a handful of the newer arrivals who've proven steady over the past few weeks. Into the loading bay, torn subway map long since replaced by a hand-drawn layout of the warehouse itself. Every entrance, every week seemed marked in pencil. We don't win this by matching their numbers, I say, and everyone's looking at me the way people look at someone they've decided to trust before they've fully decided why. We can't. There's 50 of us, maybe 1,000 of them, easy. We win by making sure this building beats them for us. Meaning what? Exactly. Backgun says, arms crossed, less argumentative than he used to be, but still needing the plan spelled out plainly. Meaning the loading bay and the side door are the only two ways in. We hold those 2 points hard, and everything else about this building already works against them. No windows at ground level, no gaps a body can squeeze through. The fence funneling anything that reaches the yard toward the gate, instead of spreading out around the whole perimeter. The fence holds a crowd that size? Youngho asks, doubtful. The fence doesn't need to hold all of them, I say. It needs to slow them down and bunch them up so the gate becomes the only real pressure point. That's where we fight, not the open field. Not 50 against 1,000 in the open. 50 against however many can physically reach one gate at a time. Dusik nods slowly, filling in the tactical shape of it with the experience I don't have. Fire, he says. We've got the generator's spare fuel, some solvents in Youngho's supply pile. We line the immediate approach to the gate, not the gate itself, and we burn a channel the second the herd's dense enough to make it worth the fuel. Doesn't kill them all. Buys us time. Thins the front line before they reach the choke point. And the roof, Minjun says. Quieter than the others, but steady in a way that would have surprised the version of him from 3 months ago. High ground. Whoever's up there can pick off stragglers that break from the main mass before they reach the fence at all. Slow the flanks down. Good, Dusik says. Minjun, Sunho, roof positions with whatever throwing weapons we've got. Rocks, glass bottles, anything that draws them toward controlled ground instead of scattering wide. Taeyong, gate line with me. Jiho, fire line, I say. I know where the fuel's stored. I know the timing we need. Fire line, he agrees. The herd reaches the outer edge of the fence just past midday, and the sound stops being something we hear from a distance and becomes something that fills the entire yard, the entire building, vibrating up through the concrete floor itself. I'm crouched near the fuel line with a length of pipe soaked in solvent, matches in my other hand, watching the first wave press against the chain link hard enough to bow the whole fence inward. It holds. Barely. The funnel toward the gate is already working exactly the way I hoped, bodies packing tighter as the fence forces them into a narrower and narrower channel. Now, Minjun calls down from the roof, voice tight. Not yet. I call back, watching the density build. Wait for the channel to fill. It's the hardest 10 seconds of my life, watching that fence bow further, watching more of them pack into the narrowing gap, every instinct screaming to act now, and forcing myself to wait because acting too early wastes the one advantage we actually have. Now, I shout, and I light the fuel line. Fire rips down the channel between the fence and the gate in a wall of heat and light, and for a few seconds the sound changes entirely. Not the low continuous drag anymore, but something sharper, more chaotic, bodies burning and stumbling into each other. The front of the herd collapsing into a tangled mess that the ones behind them keep pushing into anyway, oblivious or uncaring. It doesn't stop them. Nothing was going to stop 1,000 of them completely, but it thins the front line hard, and it buys exactly the kind of confusion Dusik needs at the gate. The gate fight is worse than anything I've been part of since this started. Dusik and Taeyong hold the choke point with spears, pipes, anything with reach, and for every one that goes down another presses forward to take its place. And it becomes less a battle with a clear shape and more a grinding, exhausting, endless rhythm of thrust and step back and thrust again. I abandon the fire line once the fuel runs dry and move to reinforce the gate directly. And it's there, mid-fight, that I hear Taeyong shout my name in a voice that isn't panic exactly, but isn't far from it either. One of them has gotten past the initial choke point, slipping through a gap where 2 exhausted defenders stumbled back at the same moment. And it's heading straight for the growing beds along the south wall, where Yoonji and two others have been trying to keep the seedlings from getting trampled in the chaos, and where Mira and Yoon retreated when the fighting started, exactly where we told them it would be safest. I don't remember crossing that distance. I remember the spear in my hand and the weight of it connecting, and I remember Myra's arm thrown protectively across Yoon's chest, and I remember the sound Yoon makes, not a scream. Something smaller and worse, a child's silence breaking into a single sharp cry before the threat drops and stays down. "You're okay," I say, more to convince myself than either of them. "You're okay. It's down. You're okay." Mira doesn't say anything. She just nods, hard, arms still locked around her son, and I turn back toward the gate because the fight isn't over just because this one moment resolved. It takes until dusk for the herd to finally thin past the point of being a coordinated pressure and back into something closer to scattered stragglers, easily handled by whoever's left standing at the gate. By the time Dusik calls the fight functionally over, everyone left standing is running on nothing but adrenaline and the specific numb exhaustion that comes after hours of not being allowed to stop. We lost people. Two of the newer arrivals who'd only been with us a few weeks. One of the watch rotation who went down defending the roof access when a smaller group broke off and tried climbing the fence's weaker northeast corner. Young-ho takes a deep gash along his forearm holding the gate line, bad enough that Yoonji, who apparently knows more first aid than she'd mentioned, spends most of the evening stitching it closed by lantern light. Fuel reserves are gone. Half the fence needs rebuilding where the fire and the weight of bodies warped it beyond use. The growing beds are trampled in 3 places. But the gate held. The building held. 50-some people went into that fight, and most of them are standing in the loading bay hours later, filthy, exhausted, alive. Dusik finds me sitting against the same support pillar where I sat after the run to the school detour, spear finally set down beside me. Hands still trembling with the aftershock of holding a weapon too tight for too many hours. "We're not the ones running from things anymore," he says, sitting down heavy beside me, echoing something he probably doesn't even realize he's echoing. "Whatever this district looks like tomorrow, this building just proved it can take the worst thing this city has to throw at it and still be standing at the end. Cost a lot to prove it," I say. "It always does." He looks out at the loading bay, at the shapes of people slowly starting to help each other up. 10 wounds, account for who's missing. But something changed today, and I don't think it's just the fence. I know what he means before he says it, because I feel it too, sitting here with exhaustion pulling at every part of me. 3 months ago, I was the person things happened to. Today, 50 people survived a night that should have ended this place completely, and a meaningful part of why they're alive traces back to decisions I made standing at a fuel line. Timing a fire by feel and instinct instead of waiting for someone else to tell me when. Somewhere south of here, past a distribution center run by a man who thinks tribute is owed to him by right. Word of tonight is going to travel eventually. I don't know yet what that word will say, but for the first time since this all started, I don't think it's going to say the word soft. Word travels faster than any of us expect. Within a week of the herd, survivors start showing up at the gate in 2s and 3s, then in small groups, all repeating some version of the same story. A warehouse near the river that held against a herd 1,000 strong and didn't just survive, but kept its people, its water, its walls standing after. Dusik vets every one of them the same careful way he always has, but there are more to vet now than any of us have time for. And by the end of that week, the 50-some who walked through that loading bay door after the herd has grown past 80. "We're going to need more growing beds," Yunji says at one of the evening gatherings, only half joking. "And more everything else, honestly. Then we build more everything else," Dusik says. It becomes the shape of the following weeks, not survival anymore in the raw, day-to-day sense of the first month, but something closer to actual construction. Young-ho gets a second wiring circuit running off a scavenged second generator, extending real light to sections of the warehouse that had been dark since we arrived. Sunho organizes what's basically a standing watch rotation now, structured shifts instead of whoever happened to be awake. Minjun leads supply runs himself these days, trusted with decisions that would have seemed absurd to imagine back when he was the guy hiding behind an overturned cart, filthy and starving. I spend most of my time now doing something I never would have called a job 3 months ago, walking the whole structure, watching where the next weak point might show up before it becomes one. sitting with Dusik most evenings going over what the place needs next. You know, people are calling this place something now, Taeyong tells me one afternoon, grinning in the particular way that means he's about to enjoy whatever he says next. Heard one of the new arrivals call it the Fortress like it's an actual name and not just a warehouse we got lucky with. It's not luck, I say, mostly out of habit at this point. I know. Tactics, planning, all that. He waves a hand. Point is, it's got a name now. People know it exists. People are choosing to walk toward it instead of just wandering until they stumble on it. That's different from where we started. He's right, and it sits strange in my chest when I actually let myself think about it. 3 months ago, I was a name on a shift schedule that mattered less than the boxes I carried. Now there's a place with my fingerprints all over its walls, and people are walking toward it on purpose. Late one evening, once most of the warehouse has settled and the generator hum has dropped to its overnight idle, I find myself on the roof again, checking the rain barrels out of habit more than necessity at this hour. Mira joins me a few minutes later, already asleep somewhere below, leaving her one of the rare stretches of quiet she gets these days. 80-some people, she says, looking out over the yard, the fence line, the growing beds recovering from the trampling they took during the herd. I keep doing the math in my head. 6 of us at the start, then 30. Now this. Numbers used to be the only thing anyone valued about me. I say. Inventory counts, shift totals, how many boxes I moved in an hour. Funny that they still matter, just not in the way they used to. They matter because of what they represent now, Mira says. Not how many boxes got moved. How many people are still breathing because a fence held, because a plan worked, because someone thought about the gap before it became the thing that got someone killed. I don't have a clean response to that, so I just stand with her for a while, looking out over the thing we've all built together. And it's the first time in longer than I can remember that silence has felt comfortable instead of empty. Yoon asked me yesterday if we're going to stay here forever, she says eventually. I didn't know what to tell him. A month ago, forever wasn't a word either of us used about anything. What did you end up saying? That forever's a big word, but this is the safest place I've felt since it all started. And that has to count for something. She looks at me sideways. You've built something here, Jiho. Whatever this becomes, that's not going to stop being true. The compliment lands heavier than I know what to do with, so I just nod, and we stand there a while longer, watching the fence line hold quiet against a night that, for once, doesn't sound like it's dragging itself toward the gate. The quiet doesn't last through the following week. A new arrival comes through the gate 3 days later, alone, favoring one leg badly, and once Dusik gets him settled and calm enough to talk, the story he tells reshapes the whole shape of what's coming. Beck's people, the man says, wincing as Yunji wraps a fresh bandage around his leg. I was part of a smaller camp south of the distribution center. We didn't pay what he wanted fast enough. He didn't send scouts to warn us a second time. He sent people with guns. How many camps has he done that to? Dusik asks, voice flat and careful. 3 that I know of. Maybe more. He's not just running a distribution center anymore. He's running most of the district south of the river, and everyone who doesn't fall in line either pays or gets absorbed by force. The man's hands are shaking, and it's not entirely from the leg. Word's already going around that he's heard about this place. The herd that broke against your fence instead of your people. He doesn't like hearing about anything he doesn't control. Dusik and I exchange a look that doesn't need words attached to it. How long until he decides we're worth the trouble? I ask. I don't know, the man says. But I don't think it's a matter of if anymore. That night, gathered again in the loading bay with the same faces who planned the fire line against the herd, Dusik lays it out plainly. No softening it for anyone's comfort. We survived the dead, he says. Beck's people aren't dead. They're organized, armed, and apparently willing to hurt other survivors just to make a point. That's a different kind of fight than anything we've faced so far. We handled his scouts once already, Taeyong says, though there's less certainty in it than his usual tone carries. 2 scouts tripping traps is not the same as however many armed people he's willing to send once he decides we're worth the effort, Sunho says. I think about the herd, about the fire line, about the gate holding through hours of grinding pressure that should have broken it. I think about everything this place has become since the day we walked in with 30 exhausted people and nothing but concrete walls and a plan. We're not the same 50 people who almost didn't make it through that door 3 months ago, I say. We've got walls Beck's people haven't seen tested. We've got a fence, a fire line, a roof position, 100 people now instead of 30. If he comes expecting an easy tribute from scared survivors, that's not what he's going to find. And if he comes with more than we can hold? Backgun asks, some of his old skepticism resurfacing, though quieter now, less combative than it used to be. I don't have a comfortable answer for that, so I give him the honest one instead. Then we make sure whatever it costs him to take this place is more than he's willing to pay. Same as the herd. Same as everything we've done since day one. We don't win by matching what they've got. We win by making sure this place is smarter than whatever they throw at it. Dusik nods slowly, and something in his expression settles the way it did the night he first mentioned the warehouse. Back when it was just an idea and a torn subway map. Then we start preparing, he says, because I don't think Beck's the kind of man who waits long once he's made up his mind. Outside, past the fence, past the yard, somewhere south of the river. A man who spent the last 3 months rebuilding the exact kind of hierarchy the old world ran on is deciding, right now, whether a warehouse full of survivors who refuse to kneel is worth the trouble of breaking. I don't know yet how that decision ends, but for the first time since this all started, I'm not the one waiting to find out what happens to me. I'm one of the people deciding what happens next. Beck doesn't wait long. 5 days after the wounded man's warning, one of the roof watch spots movement on the main road at dawn. Not scattered, not shuffling, but marching in the deliberate, coordinated way only living people move. Dusik joins me on the roof within minutes, and through the gray morning light, we count at least 30 armed figures, spread in a loose formation that speaks of actual military instinct, or at least someone who watched enough of it before the world ended. That's not a probe, Dusik says quietly. That's a statement. Positions, I call down, and the warehouse that took 3 months to build from nothing moves into the rhythm we've drilled into it since the herd. Sunho and a rotating team on the roof with whatever ranged options we've scavenged, Minjun and Youngho reinforcing the gate, Taeyong running messages between positions, Yoonji and the others not fighting moving the vulnerable, Mira, Yoon, the youngest kids, a handful of the injured, toward the deepest interior section of the warehouse. The same reinforced storage room we built specifically for exactly this scenario. Beck himself walks at the center of the formation, close enough now that details resolve. Mid-50s, dressed like he still expects the world to recognize a suit even now. Flanked by 2 men carrying weapons like they know how to use them. He stops well within shouting distance of the gate, unbothered, like a man arriving for a scheduled meeting rather than a siege. I've heard a great deal about this place, he calls out, voice carrying easy across the yard. The herd that broke against your fence. The scouts who came back rattled by a hole in the ground and some scrap metal. Impressive for people with no real weapons and no real training. Dusik answers from the gate, me a step behind him, spear in hand. You didn't march 30 armed men out here for small talk. No. Beck agrees, almost pleasant about it. I came because a place this organized, holding this much territory, this many people, this much water and food, that's not something I can simply ignore. Everything south of the river operates under my protection now. Groups that accept that arrangement thrive. Groups that don't tend to find the world considerably harder than it needs to be. We've survived plenty hard already, I say, and Beck's eyes shift to me for the first time, assessing. The same way a scout assessed our fence weeks ago. You're the one they mention, he says. The tactician. The warehouse worker who apparently taught 50 scared people how to burn a herd instead of running from it. His tone doesn't shift, still measured, still unbothered. I respect competence when I see it. I built everything I have now the same way, recognizing what works and using it. The difference between us is that I understood early that competence needs structure behind it to matter at scale. You've built something impressive with 50, 80, however many you're up to now. I command hundreds. Eventually, numbers decide these things, whatever cleverness gets you through the early stretch. Then why are you still just talking? Sunho calls down from the roof, voice tight but steady. Beck's smile doesn't waver. Because I'd rather absorb something valuable intact than burn it down proving a point. Last chance, gentlemen. Open the gate, accept the arrangement, and this place keeps everything it's built, just with a portion going toward the district's greater stability. Refuse, and I take it anyway, minus whatever gets destroyed convincing you. The answer isn't a negotiation. It's a decision Dusik and I already made 3 nights ago, sitting in the loading bay with the same faces who held the fire line against the herd. We don't open that gate, Dusik says. Beck's expression flattens, the pleasant mask dropping away into something colder and more familiar, the exact look I remember from Sanctual. From every person who ever assumed my compliance was owed to them by default. Your choice, he says, and turns to his men. Take it. The assault that follows isn't like the herd. The herd was mindless weight thrown against a fixed point. This is coordinated, adaptive. Beck's men split into 2 groups, one pressing the main gate hard, the other circling toward the northeast fence line. The same weaker-looking section we used against his scouts weeks ago, clearly briefed on exactly where our defenses had shown gaps before. They know our old tricks, Taeyong shouts, spotting the flanking group from his position near the gate. Then we don't use old tricks, I call back, already moving toward the northeast section myself with Minjun close behind. New ground, new plan. The trench and tripwire that worked on 2 unprepared scouts do nothing against a dozen armed men moving with actual tactical awareness, sidestepping the obvious signs of a prepared position within seconds. But I'd expected that, 3 nights ago, staring at the map and thinking about how a man like Beck plans. He studies what worked before and adapts around it. Which means the actual advantage isn't in repeating what worked, it's in making him think he's outsmarted a trap that was never the real trap at all. The northeast fence section gives way faster than it should, deliberately weakened 2 nights earlier under cover of dark. Funneling Beck's flanking group into the narrow gap between the warehouse's exterior wall and a stack of shipping containers, we moved into position specifically to create a dead-end corridor with only one way back out. Now, I shout, and Young-ho, positioned on a catwalk above the container stack, drops a section of chain-link fencing weighted with scrap metal down across the gap behind them, sealing the flanking group inside the corridor with Minjun and me already closing from the open end, spears, and improvised weapons ready. It's not a fair fight in the way any of Beck's men expect. They came prepared for another version of the herd, or another version of the trench and tripwire scouts. They didn't come prepared for a corridor built specifically to trap armed men who assumed they understood our defenses because they'd seen an earlier, cruder version of them. The flanking group breaks fast, several dropping weapons and raising hands the second the trap's shape becomes clear. Others attempting to fight their way back out and finding the sealed gap unmovable under the added weight. At the main gate, the fight is harder, closer to even. Dusik and Taeyong holding the choke point against Beck's larger force with the same grinding intensity as the herd fight. Except this time the enemy fights back with intention instead of mindless hunger, and for several minutes it's genuinely unclear which way it's going to tip. It tips when Beck, watching his flanking maneuver collapse entirely from his position behind the main assault, realizes the numbers he was counting on to eventually win through sheer weight have just been cut by nearly half. Trapped in a container corridor with no way to reinforce the main gate fight. Fall back, he orders, voice losing some of its earlier composure. Fall back, regroup. But falling back from a coordinated siege that's already lost its coordination isn't clean, and Dusik doesn't let the moment go to waste. Pressing the advantage at the gate hard enough that Beck's retreat turns into something closer to a scramble. Several more of his men dropping weapons in the chaos of trying to disengage from a fight they no longer believe they're winning. I find Beck himself near the fence line, separated from what's left of his retreating force, flanked only by the 2 men who walked beside him at the start. And for a moment the 4 of us stand in a rough circle, breathing hard, weapons raised, and nobody moves first. You had 30 armed men and a plan built on assuming we were the same 50 scared people who broke against a herd 3 months ago, I say. You didn't account for what this place actually became since then. Everyone thinks their little fortress is the exception, Beck says, though the composure from earlier has thinned considerably. Replaced by something closer to genuine calculation, a man realizing the math he walked in with no longer applies. Every group that resisted me believed the same thing, right up until it stopped being true. Maybe, I say, or maybe you kept winning against people who never got the chance to build something like this. We did. His eyes flick past me, taking in Dusik and Taeyong closing the distance from the gate, Sunho and Young-ho descending from their positions. Minjun and the others emerging from the container corridor with several of his own men, now disarmed and being escorted at spear point. The math, visibly, is failing him in real time. This isn't over, Beck says, but it comes out thinner than he probably intends, more habit than actual threat. It is for today, Dusik says, arriving beside me, voice hard in a way I haven't heard from him before. Take what's left of your people and go. Come back with more, and we'll be ready for that too. Same as we were ready for this. Beck doesn't answer. He just looks at the wreckage of his plan for one long moment. Disarmed men, a collapsed flanking maneuver, a gate that held against everything he brought to break it, and then turns and walks away, his two remaining escorts following, none of them looking back. We hold the disarmed prisoners under guard through the rest of the day, and by evening, Dusik makes the call to release them rather than keep feeding mouths that never chose to be here in the first place, on the condition they don't return under Beck's banner. Most of them take the offer without hesitation, several visibly relieved to be walking away from the whole arrangement rather than back into it. That night, once the wounded are tended and the gates reinforced against a return that may or may not come, I find myself sitting near the growing beds again, spear finally set down. The same spot where Mira and I stood a week earlier looking out over 80 people and calling it something worth protecting. Taeyong drops down beside me, exhaustion written into every line of him, but something like disbelief threaded through it too. We just beat an actual warlord, he says, like the sentence still doesn't sound real coming out of his own mouth. Not a herd, not scared survivors. A guy who's apparently been running half the district like his own personal kingdom. We didn't beat him with more guns, I say. We beat him because he assumed a fence and a fire line meant he already understood us. You gonna do the thing where you underplay it again? I'm not underplaying it, I say, and for once. I mean it plainly, without the old reflex to shrink the moment down to something smaller and safer to feel. We won. It cost us, but we won, and Beck knows now that this place isn't something he gets to just absorb. Taeyong studies me for a moment. Something warmer than his usual joking settling into his expression. You know you're not the same guy who used to carry Minjun's boxes without saying a word, right? I know, I say, and for the first time, saying it doesn't feel like a fact I'm still convincing myself of. It just feels true. Above us, the warehouse stands quiet in the dark, walls intact, gate reinforced. 80-some people settling into whatever rest they can find after a day that could have ended everything, and instead ended with Beck's retreat and a promise, spoken or not, that this place isn't finished growing. Somewhere south of the river, a man who built his power on the assumption that everyone eventually kneels is walking home with fewer men than he arrived with. And a lesson about this particular fortress that he isn't likely to forget. I don't know if he comes back. I don't know if this is truly over. But for tonight, for the first time since a stranger screamed on a street corner and the whole world fell apart around me, I sleep without waiting for someone else to tell me it's safe. 6 weeks pass, and Beck never comes back. Word filters up through the same channels that always carry district gossip these days, that whatever was left of his organization fractured hard after the siege. Smaller camps he'd been extracting tribute from stopped paying the moment word spread that his men had walked into a trap built specifically to unmake their advantage. That a warlord who staked his whole authority on always winning doesn't survive losing in front of witnesses. Whether he's dead or scattered somewhere licking the wound of a defeat he never planned for, none of us know for certain, and none of us spend much time wondering. The warehouse doesn't stop growing just because the biggest threat to it stopped showing up. By the time the weather turns properly cold, the population has settled somewhere past 120. And the place looks less like a warehouse pretending to be a shelter and more like an actual settlement. Proper sleeping quarters partitioned with salvage materials. A working kitchen area built around 2 more generators Youngho's team got running. Growing beds expanded twice over under Yunji's supervision. A genuine rotation of scouts mapping safer supply routes further out than anyone dared travel in the first weeks. I'm on the roof most mornings now, less out of necessity and more out of habit, watching the yard wake up below. Minjun leading a supply team out through the gate with the easy confidence of someone who's forgotten he was ever the guy hiding behind an overturned cart. Sunho training a handful of the newer arrivals in basic defense, his bandaged hand from that very first run long since healed into a scar, he doesn't mention anymore. Taeyong's somewhere in the middle of it all, making somebody laugh at something that probably isn't as funny as his delivery makes it sound. Dusik finds me up there most mornings too, and we don't always talk. Sometimes we just stand there, watching the thing we built keep being exactly what we built it to be. You remember the first night, he says, one particularly quiet morning, when I told you I didn't like deciding things alone. I remember. Haven't had to since. He says it simply, without ceremony, the way he says most things, but it lands with weight anyway. This place doesn't run because of me. It runs because enough of us figured out how to build something worth running. Mira and Yoon have a proper room now, not much bigger than my old apartment, but warmer in every way that apartment never was. Yoon's beans, the ones he fussed over so carefully back in the early weeks, produced an actual harvest last month, small but real, and he insisted on personally delivering a portion to every family in the warehouse, proud in the specific, unguarded way only a child can manage. He asked me yesterday if this counts as home now. Mira tells me one evening. The two of us walking the fence line during a quiet stretch of watch duty, neither of us technically needed to cover ourselves, but do anyway out of habit. I told him yes. I meant it this time. Feels different than when he asked back at the start. I say, everything's different than it was at the start. She looks at me, something steady and warm in it that's grown slowly over the months rather than arriving all at once. You know, none of this happens without the thing you did in that alley, walking toward the noise instead of away from it. I don't know if I decided that. I say, I think I just stopped being able to walk away. That's still a decision, she says. Most people don't make it. Minjun finds me one afternoon by the fence, watching the supply team he led that morning unload their haul. And there's something in the way he approaches that tells me he's been building up to whatever he's about to say for a while. I never said it properly, he says, not quite meeting my eyes. Back at the warehouse job, before all this, I was a genuine piece of garbage to you. For years, and you had every reason to leave me behind that day I was hiding behind that cart. Filthy and starving and exactly as pathetic as I probably deserve to look. You don't have to. I do, actually. He finally looks at me directly. I've spent 3 months trying to earn something I never once thought I owed anybody. Back when I was the guy laughing while you carried my boxes. I don't know if I've earned it yet, but I wanted to say it plainly, at least once, instead of just working hard and hoping you noticed. I think about the version of myself that stood over him in that alley. The small ugly part that wanted to walk past exactly the way he'd walked past me for years. I think about how far that version of me feels now, not erased, just outgrown, the way a smaller room feels once you've lived somewhere bigger. You've earned it, I say, and it's the truth, plain and uncomplicated. Whatever this place is now, you built part of it too. He doesn't say anything else, just nods, something loosening in his shoulders that's been tight since the day I found him behind that cart, and walks back toward the unloading crew, and that's the whole conversation, and it's enough. On a clear evening near the edge of winter, most of the warehouse gathers in the yard for something that started as a practical supply inventory and turned, somewhere along the way, into something closer to a celebration nobody planned, but everyone needed. Dusik stands near the fence, going over the numbers with the same careful attention he's given every count since the first ration crackers back at the subway platform. Except now the numbers tell a different story entirely. Enough stored food to comfortably outlast the coming cold months. Water reserves steady from the rain collection system. 120-some people, safe, fed, and for the first time in a long while, not bracing for the next disaster. 6 of us, at the start, he says, loud enough for the gathered crowd to hear, echoing the same count Mira and I ran through on the roof months ago. 30 when we left the station. 50 when the herd broke against this fence instead of us. 120 now, and counting. A ragged cheer goes up, tired and real, the kind of sound that comes from people who've earned the right to make it. I stand near the back, spear long since retired to a corner of my quarters, more symbol now than necessary tool, and I think about a version of myself from what feels like a lifetime ago. Standing in a warehouse aisle carrying boxes that weren't his, absorbing insults he never had the standing to answer, going home to a room that felt smaller every single day he lived in it. That version of me is gone. Not forgotten. Just gone. The way a season ends and doesn't come back the same way twice. Taeyong finds his way to my side during the gathering, uncharacteristically quiet for a moment before he speaks. You ever think about what would have happened if you just stayed in that alley that first night? Waited it out, hoped it passed. I think about it sometimes, I admit. I don't think I'd still be standing here if I had. Guess it's a good thing you decided you were done being the guy who waits things out. He grins, some of his usual energy returning. Useless in Jiho. Look how that turned out. You were never useless, I say. You bought Harry's victim 2 seconds that mattered. Yeah, well. He shrugs, but something in it looks pleased despite the deflection. Turns out most of us just needed somewhere worth being brave for. Later, once the gathering thins and most of the warehouse settles into the quiet rhythm of an evening that doesn't require anyone to keep watch with dread in their chest, I climb up to the roof one more time, alone, and look out over everything. The fence holds solid against the dark, the yard beyond it quiet, the growing beds resting under a light frost that Yunji assures everyone the beans will survive. Somewhere below, Myra's laughing at something Yun said, the sound carrying faint up through the cold air. Somewhere else, Minjun and Sunho are checking the gate mechanism one more time before the night watch officially begins, out of habit more than necessity now. I think about a puddle 2 meters wide evaporating in a desert. No, that's not right. That's not my story. That's some other beginning I half remember from somewhere. My beginning was smaller than that, and just as unremarkable. A kid from a warehouse floor nobody looked at twice, carrying boxes that weren't his, eating instant noodles alone in a room that faced a wall. That kid didn't know he had this in him. I'm not sure I believe he did. Even now, looking back at him from up here, I think the apocalypse didn't reveal something that was always hiding underneath. I think it just stopped protecting the world that never gave him a reason to try. Below me, the fortress sleeps, walls thick, gates sealed, 120 people breathing easy for the first time and longer than most of them can remember. I don't know what comes next. I don't need to know tonight. Beck is gone. The herd is a story people tell now instead of a wound still bleeding, and the walls around all of us are solid enough to hold whatever tomorrow decides to bring. For tonight, that's enough. For tonight, this is simply home, and I built it, and I'm not the same man who used to disappear the moment someone stopped looking directly at him. I stay on the roof a while longer, watching the fence hold quiet against the dark, and then I go back down, into the warmth, into the sound of people who chose, every single day, to keep believing this place was worth defending. The fortress stands. And so, finally do I.